Hello guys, my name is No Kawa, and I just want to share the speedrun build I've been running. First off, the skills we're gonna use are Heatwave, Ash Blast, and Overheat. Heatwave is mostly used to AoE inflict burn on mobs. We also use it to put debuffs on enemies so they will receive more damage. We'll look at that mod in a bit. Ash Blast is here to buff our overheat damage. It may be tempting sometimes to use Ash Blast as an emergency stun, but honestly, you're better off saving it to one-shot mobs or even elites. Overheat is going to be our main source of damage. We will explain later how it's doing so much damage, but as you can read from its description, the skill does some damage to enemies without burn on them. However, it does so much more damage if the mobs have burn on them. Another thing to note with Overheat is its range is extremely huge. I've hit mobs from across the map with this skill. About this build's class tree, I'm not gonna explain every single node, but as you can see, we want a lot of cooldown reductions. Notably, we have the World Ablaze, we have the Wildfire, which is perhaps one of the most important node in the class tree, as it lowers the cooldown on all of our skills. I also decided to pick up the Marble Orchard. This will lower the Ash Blast cooldown from 16 seconds to 14 seconds. Do you really need the extra 2 seconds? Personally, I think so. Anomaly builds, bread and butter is how often you are using your skills. And in a fast-paced speedrun, 2 seconds can make a world of difference. Another notable nodes are we have the Gifted, which will boost our anomaly power from 165k to 170k. We have the Phoenix Nestling, which will give you a second chance if you messed up. We also have the Grave Ablaze, which is very important because it will boost your overheat damage, and like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be our main source of damage. Now, about our gear, the build revolves around the Acari set. It is so good that some people are saying it might as well be the best legendary set in the game actually. I want to explain first the best in slot gear, and then later I'll try to provide some alternatives for pieces you may not have. The main gun I'm currently using is the Heir to the Desert. It has the Sandstorm mod, and I put on Fortress. About Fortress, perhaps you've already heard how insane this tier 3 weapon mod is. It comes from the legendary shotgun Death Shield. Basically, it will buff all of your abilities. That includes your skills, your guns, even your melee. Do you actually need to have Heir to the Desert? Not particularly. I use it because 1, it dropped on me recently and I've always wanted it, and 2, the 35-meter range is sometimes nice for farther enemies or for those that fly away from you. Another popular option is the Funeral Pyre, so you can rain down another OP mod, which is the Shadow Comet. You can also use actually Death Shield as your main gun. So basically the idea is to have the Fortress mod and then another damaging ability on your main gun. The Comet is desirable because it does AoE damage. For your secondary gun, you want to use the mod called the Moaning Winds. So before you start your run, you want to empty your magazine on this secondary gun so that it will trigger the winds whenever you switch weapons. Throughout your run, you don't ever want to fill up your magazine. You want to keep it empty all the time. In this case, I'm using the Death Shield, but you can also use the Anomaly, since it naturally has the Moaning Winds on it. Maybe you've got the Anomaly, but you don't want to dismantle it yet. You can use the Death Shield actually on your main hand or as your main gun, and then use the Anomaly for your secondary gun. You can actually even use purples for as long as you can put on Moaning Winds. Tip for your secondary gun, use something with longer reload time so you won't accidentally fill up your magazine. If you use like a submachine gun with 1.1 second reload, next thing you know, Moaning Winds is not proccing anymore. Now with our gear, note that you don't need the mods on the specific pieces that I have them on. You just have to have them somewhere, right? Okay, so like mentioned, the Acari 3-piece is the core of this build. We are gonna use the helm, the chest piece, and the pants. These 3 pieces are the only ones with anomaly power passives from the Acari set. For the mods, we'll leave the fire tsunami, and then on my piece I have the tier 3 mod master consumer. The master consumer enables our big AoE combo. The mod will consume both ash and burn, and will buff our overheat damage to 150% if it consumes both statuses. So what's gonna happen is that every 14 seconds, which is our Ash Blast cooldown, we use our Heatwave charges to inflict burn, and then we Ash Blast, and then we overheat right after. With this combo, some elites are actually going to be one-shots. The Acari chest piece naturally has the detonator mod. This is very important because it will lower the overheat cooldown from 10.4 seconds down to 4.6. I also have the Ash Increased Range mod. Is this a must-have mod? Not really. I have it on because the extra stun range is nice for our survivability. But if the enemies are not affected by burn anyways, the Ash alone will not trigger the Master Consumer. Other mods you can use are the tier 3 Captain Hunter, which will increase your elite damage. You can also use the tier 3 Power Assimilation, which will boost your anomaly power for each elite present on the battlefield. You can also use some defensive mods like the Emergency Stance, or also known as the Golem. It is currently bugged, as you guys are probably known by now, which it will allow you to basically have infinite number of damage reduction, and it will stay on with you. Damage Absorber is also a good alternative if you don't want to use Emergency Stance. On my pants, we have the Anomaly Echo, which we will leave on. We will also use Burnout for its debuff. For the gloves and boots, any epic gear with anomaly power and cooldown reduction would be perfect. The third passive is less important, but notable ones are Skill Leech and Status Power. We will use the mods Ride the Wave and Tidal Wave. And this will give us 3 charges of hit waves. Along with Burnout mods, this will boost our damage to affected enemies for up to 75% more. So we will also use Pants on Fire This mod alone can single-handedly clear trash mobs from across the map. If I am to rate this mod, Pants on Fire, I'll definitely give it a perfect 5-star. It's really, really good. And then the last mod we will use is the Untamed Power. It will do an AoE damage based on 30% of your anomaly power. With all of our anomaly power boosting mods, this will be a lot more than what the tooltip would say. Another note on this mod is it doesn't have an internal cooldown. You can trigger it as often as you want. It will also trigger from melee because melee is considered to be a skill, technically. So one thing I forgot to mention also is the Acari tier bonus. So if you use any 3-piece from the legendary set, it will have the bonus of every enemy damaged by hit wave grants 50% anomaly power bonus for 10 seconds. So that is a really, really good. And yeah, it will buff our overheat damage, which is, like I said, going to be our main damaging skill. Now all these gear and mods keep the build intact and gels one skill to the other. I have some suggestions in terms of replacements, which should work fine if you're not after speedrunning and you simply just want to do gold on CT15s. For the guns, if you don't have both Fortress and Moaning Winds, I would suggest replacing it with damaging mods like the Shadow Comet, or you can also use the Ultimate Storm Weep. Actually, even Vulnerable mod would be really good. The tier 3 Vulnerable mod is of course better, since it only has a 1-second cooldown compared to the tier 1 and tier 2 counterpart. So but like Shadow Comet plus Vulnerable is really good combo. For those who doesn't know, Vulnerable will debuff enemies to receive plus 25% more damage for 10 seconds. As for the Acari set, you have to have at least 3 pieces to trigger the tier bonus. But what if you don't have the chest piece or the pants, right? So full disclosure though, the 3-piece we have here are the best in slot, mainly because of their anomaly power passives. But if you are missing just 1 piece, honestly feel free to use the gloves or the boots. In my opinion, the tier 3 mods from the Acari set are only about 85% must-haves. Do you really need the extra width on your heat wave? Not really. You can counter the lack of it by being more precise on targeting enemies. Would Anomaly Echo stop you from golding CD15 Chem Lab? Not really. It will improve your damage and your time, but the lack of it will not break your runs. The detonator, however, is quite important because we want to spam overheat when Ash Blast is on cooldown. So we are triggering our mod Pants on Fire. But if you are missing the Acari chest piece, it is still gonna be doable. You just have to adjust your playstyle. So instead of spamming overheat when you don't have Ash Blast, you wanna save it instead. You may also need to clear mobs on your own instead of highly relying on Pants on Fire, just because we're trying to save the combo of Heatwave, Ash Blast, and Overheat on the 14-second window that Ash Blast is on cooldown. So this is my comprehensive guide to the best in slot speedrunning anomaly power guide. It is a ton of fun having skills that melt mobs every 14 seconds. This build can gold any CT15 in-game except of course for Eye of the Storm. As with any builds, it can take some time to get used to it and practice to adjust your expedition routes based on this build's strength. I really hope you guys learned something from this guide. Feel free to comment any questions or suggestions you may have and I'll try to answer them. I would really appreciate any likes or subs for my new YouTube channel. Expect more Outriders videos and good luck on your runs.